G'day, guys. We are live. Welcome to the Thunder from Down Under podcast. I'm your host, Graham Solomon. And as always, smash that like and heart button to welcome our guest. Give him some love when he comes into the fold. Welcome him to the Thunderdome. Thanks for all the viewers that check in, week out. We've got a special guest today. Just before I go there, remember, if you're not a part of the family, go to the Graham Solomon Thunder from Down Under YouTube channel, hit subscribe so that you can come live with us when we have guests like today. And our special guest today is William Tingle, who is none other known as the GOAT, and he's a pretty well-renowned sub-2 specialist around the States. So it's a great honour to have him here. I have to do a public apology to him first because we've been trying to get this happening for a long time, and I've messed it up every time. I've had tech issues right up till today, and William's been very patient. So shout out, William. Thank you very much for your patience. As people that know him, he's a fairly laid-back character, so he's been very tolerant. So I appreciate that. So without any further ado, I'll introduce the man himself that's known as the GOAT, William Tingle. Thanks for coming to the Thunder from Down Under podcast.
Hey, Graham, thanks so much for having me. We're really excited to finally be here. I was beginning to get a little bit paranoid that you didn't want to have me on, actually, but I'm glad we got it all sorted out.
No, honestly, William, I've never had this much problem, and not with you, but just
Right.
was one of those ones.
Yeah.
But better late than never. And for me, it's a pleasure. I used to watch a fair bit. Used to watch your podcast, and I love your style. And I love how in depth you go into stuff. So it's a pleasure for me, and I'm sure people that view this and even watch the replay will be the same. It's always good to see you on the camera. Now, you're known as the GOAT. The big question is, in Australia, some people get really cool nicknames, but then we go back and we found out that they named themselves and spread it around themselves. Was that the fact with you, or did you have a mate that called you?
It really wasn't. I would never, ever, anybody that knows me knows I would never presume to be the GOAT. Actually, what happened was I had a student, and still have him, Sam. He's in our Sub-2 Max group, and he very frequently, when I would make a post or explain something in detail, his comment would simply be "GOAT talk." And that's just where it came from. My students just started calling me that, and of course, when we started our Facebook Live, we named it GOAT Talk. And if you look actually behind me here, you'll see that stuffed goat there. That was actually a gift from one of our students for my birthday at a mastermind. They recorded a bunch of stuff, a bunch of phrases that I use, and you can press a button on him and he says all this stuff's really pretty cool. So anyway, that's where it came from.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, we love nicknames in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Straight away, someone moves from India, they get an Australian nickname. That's just the way it is. So I love nicknames, and the GOAT's a good one. You got lucky with that one. It's like being called Legend or Top Dog or Top G or something. So you did well. So that's cool. And you're right. I mean, that was a bit of a joke. I couldn't imagine you naming yourself the GOAT, but it's a pretty good title. And it's a speciality what you do. There's not a lot of people that do it well. And just one thing, for I've got a little bit of an Australian audience. This is a US based real estate podcast. Sub-2. When I first heard about a Sub-2, I thought if I went and tried to pick something in Australia up on a Sub-2, I'd be arrested and put in jail for 20 years. That's how different the real estate landscape is in Australia compared to America. So I couldn't believe when someone explained what a Sub-2 was. I'm like, this can't be real. You can actually do this. So it's quite an amazing thing, which I'll get you to go into a little bit more. But first, William, I just want you to introduce yourself to the audience and just give them your backstory about, how you got into real estate, what you did, and how you become, the GOAT, I guess, in the Sub-2 world. So just take us through the whole journey and, just tell us it in your own words.
Sure. Well, Graham, it could be told by a million different people. I grew up in the South, middle class family. I had some things I went through in my early years. I actually quit school in the 9th grade. And most people, I don't know what the educational system's like in Australia, but here in America, they're 12, to get a high school diploma, you go through 12 years of school. I quit school in the 9th grade. And for most people, that means they have a life of menial work, minimum wage jobs, that sort of thing. The thing I had going for me was I was a very hard worker. I learned very quickly, and I just moved through the ranks. I found myself at the age of about 40. I was a district manager covering a whole state for a restaurant chain. I did pretty well financially at the time. I was making, I don't know, 60, 70,000 a year, which was pretty good income in 1999 for somebody with a ninth grade education. So, but I was stuck in that because I didn't have a formal education. I couldn't just go out and get another job. I worked 60, 70 hours a week. I didn't get much time to spend with my family. I was really miserable, and looking forward to doing that until retirement and then living on Social Security, because when you got a family, you can't save any money. Most people are consumers. I live just like everybody else. I was 2 paychecks away from living in the street basically. So one night, a Carlton Sheets infomercial. Carlton Sheets was this big guy during the 80s and 90s that was always on late night TV saying, you too can buy real estate with no money down. And I just picked up the phone that night. I called, I ordered the course. It came, UPS truck brought it a couple of weeks later, and I opened it up and I started reading it. And I just did the step by step what they said to do. And a month later, I bought my first house. And a few weeks later, I bought a second house, and then I bought a third house. And I said, hey, this stuff might actually work. And so I established some goals, put some things in place. And I said, I want to quit my job in 1 year. I need to buy this many houses to be able to live without a job. And a year later, I quit my job. And that was that was in August of 2000. And I've been a real estate investor ever since. That's how I got started.
Wow. So you moved pretty quick from like 99 to 2000. Like
Right.
so you're an action taker. Obviously, you just went bang bang bang.
Yeah.
But just what I really like about the start of that story is, like you said, you had a work ethic. Where'd you pick that up from? Was it just natural, or did you have people around you that you learned that off? A good work ethic.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I see this in students. When you're in a situation, if you're a child, you hear about immersion training, and like you've heard of maybe a story about, you hear the story and you think, wow, this is crazy, but you teach your kid to swim, you throw them in the deep end.
Yeah.
You're there to save them if they can't swim. But if you find yourself in a situation where you've got to swim to survive, you'll do it. So was the work ethic natural? I don't know. I grew up with my parents telling me how lazy I was. Most kids are. But I know this, when you're 15 and you're on the streets and your choice is to either work, to survive or not make it, you're going to do what you got to do. So that's where I was. I quit school. I ran away from home. I had a bad home situation, and I worked 3 jobs for minimum wage until I was able to work up through the ranks and do something. So, but I see that in students now. People come to you. They want you to teach them how to do real estate, but most of the time it's the most miserable, most desperate students that find success. The
Yeah.
people that are comfortable where they are, they're making good money, they're not particularly miserable, but they just want more. It's harder for them to succeed because they're not as hungry, they're not as desperate. But that's where I was. I had to work. I had to work to survive.
That's a massive point. We call them thunderbolts in here instead of
Mhm.
gold nuggets. You've hit us with a thunderbolt. That that is generally the case with anything. Someone that's more hungry and more desperate generally, um, they leave themselves. That they burn the boats and they're on the island.
Right.
They burn the boats, and middle class is probably the biggest killer of wealth creation, because you get comfortable. You've got the nice cars and the
Right.
restaurants and all that. So that's a massive point. So people just like you said, even sometimes if you're in middle class, you've got to put your back against the wall somehow and put some, like you said, goals and expectations on yourself, or else you're
Right.
just not going to follow through. So, yeah, that's massive. And so you took action. It's 2000. You've had your first year in real estate. You're saying, right, I want to do this now. Were you doing sub twos from the start, or were you doing other sort of real estate as well?
If anybody's ever read the Carlton Sheets course, and that is how I got started, it's an inch deep and 10 miles wide. It tells you a little bit about a lot of stuff. Every technique under the sun is in there. But I knew in the very beginning I needed cash flow. you can do a lot of things to generate cash, wholesaling or rehabbing. I didn't have any rehab skills. I still, if a light bulb burns out, I call somebody to change it. I just, I'm not that skilled at
Yeah,
those types of things. But I knew I wanted cash flow. So I said, what can I do to get cash flow? Someone recommended sandwich lease options. I tried that. I didn't like the messiness of that. But what I knew was that for me, even borrowing money from banks, I had good credit. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had really good credit because I paid my bills. But what I learned was that banks, even if you have good credit, are only going to finance so many houses for you before you have too much exposure. You owe them too much money. And I quickly calculated that if I could get a bank to let me buy 10, 15 houses, that wasn't going to be enough to create the lifestyle that I wanted for me and my family. So I'm like in search of what else I can do. So the first time I heard about Sub 2, I thought the people talking about it were nuts. And I said, there's no way somebody's going to sign a deed to a house and stay responsible for the mortgage. But if you don't try, you never know. So the next opportunity I had, a fellow called me and he said he just bought the house a year before. He couldn't afford to make the payments anymore. He was getting a divorce. He was losing one income. He wasn't behind on his payments, but he knew he would soon. He just wanted what he owed. And I said, well, listen, if I can make the payments for you and take over your loan, would that work? And he said, absolutely. So there was our first Sub 2. And the proof, the proof of concept's right there. Sure, they'll do it. So after that, I said, well, this is my key to buying as many houses as I want without bank financing. So from then on, every house that I looked to, if there was a potential for a Sub 2, I was going after it. So that's, my first 3 or 4 houses I bought with sandwich lease options. I did a little bit of bank financing, but once I did those and learned about Sub 2, it's been almost exclusively that
yeah.
since then.
So it really tickled your fancy. You went, right, this
Oh
is my
man, it's
strategy,
fantastic.
and you doubled down on it. Could I ask you now then to give us, like, I know a lot of people know about Sub 2s, probably not enough. They probably think they know a bit about them. But for someone that's a viewer in the audience now that has heard about it but hasn't done it, can you give us a quick, like, Reader's Digest sort of overview of Sub 2,
Right.
just for the people that probably haven't got their heads around it?
Right, sure. Well, most people today that buy a house, they go through conventional means. They probably use a realtor. They find a house they like. They fill out a loan application. Bank of America or someone lends them most or all of the money to buy the house. They get a mortgage. They get a deed. The deed conveys ownership from the seller. The mortgage, they give a mortgage to the bank and they pledge to pay X per month for 30 years, typically. And that's what most people do. Well, if someone gets into trouble, maybe they got a job transfer, they don't have much equity, they're getting a divorce, they're going through some life changing experience, and they want to move that house quickly, they'll either sell it for what they owe on it or for very little more in most cases. They'll give an investor a call, or an investor will contact them and say, hey, can I make your payments for you until I can sell the house at some point in the future? If that's acceptable to the seller, that's what we'll go in and do. And we just simply do that. We take title to the house, either in a trust or an entity or in our own name. We'll take that bank statement and start making those payments to the bank just like the owner did. They give us ownership and they stay responsible for the loan, although we make the payments. That's really how it
Yeah.
works.
Man, you did that pretty quick. That was good. I reckon you've done it a few times, haven't you,
Yeah,
William? You've
we,
done. You've got that down pat. That's amazing. But
we,
that's really,
yeah.
really hits you between the eyes because that's what it
Mhm,
is. Um,
mhm.
Now, the big question is, you obviously do Sub 2s properly and you teach them properly. What do you see the difference? Do you see a lot of people out there doing them wrong, or doing them not quite how they should be doing them?
Well, the biggest thing is that, excuse me, the biggest thing is that there's Facebook and social media. There's so many people that are experts. You know what I mean? And it's just like, would you ask, for a doctor's opinion about a sickness in a Facebook group? Well, my gosh, you're going to get 1,000 different responses. And it's the same thing with Sub 2 or any other form of real estate investing. There are
Yeah,
a lot of people that share a lot of wrong concepts, things that you're supposed to be able to do to make this happen or that happen. It's just not true. Uh, so there's a big problem with that out there, and we definitely want to make sure we're doing everything properly. The biggest thing you can do with your seller is disclose completely what's happening and what their potential issues may be down the road because of what you're doing. Will they be able to buy a house in 2 or 3 years? Maybe, maybe not. Make them aware of those things. Make them aware that they're still going to be liable for that note. If the
Yeah,
worst were to happen, it can damage them. And
yeah,
and don't try to gloss over that. That's just a fact of life.
yeah,
But disclosure is just super important
yeah.
with your sellers.
Yeah, there. That's a really good point. Just be a decent person. Be
Mhm.
have integrity and forthright. And
Right.
yeah, definitely. Now the other thing I was gonna ask you for your weirdest sub two story, and then your funniest sub two story. Like, because I'm sure because it's a little bit different than conventional. You've probably come across a few funny issues and difficult issues during your time.
Weirdest story, gosh, I, we had one time, and you uncover these things during due diligence. Your initial phone call with a seller, may be pretty normal sounding, but you find out later. I'll tell you, the weirdest one we had a guy that we talked to. This house was actually outside of Jackson, Mississippi. It was just a couple of years ago, and this guy wanted to sell it, and he had a little bit of equity, but he had agreed to take his equity in payments, but he needed to sell this house right away. Well, my wife Jody gets on Google. He had an unusual name, so we do a little bit of due diligence on our sellers. Looked him up. The reason he told us that his wife had passed, and that's why he needed to sell the house. But what we found out was he had been charged with her murder.
Oh
Okay.
no, oh no,
Right. And he was out on bail, but it was a long story. But let's just say that he didn't have a right to sell that house. And the house ultimately went to her mother and sister because Mississippi has very specific laws where about inheritance and if you're charged with a crime and that sort of stuff. So but yeah, that was a pretty weird story. We of course
yeah,
we didn't buy that house, but yeah, that was a little bit unusual.
yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
a bit freaky, isn't it? That's a bit weird. But
Right.
just before I ask the next question, we've got a few people in the chat. Sounds great. I need your information. We'll just hang till the end. We're going to go through all William's contact points at the end, so you can get because you need to get in, with someone that knows how to do this. So that's the point I'll make. So people are loving it, William. The next question um, would be, what do you do differently than other people in the space? Like in your network, what do you pride yourself on that you see? And I don't, like we're not putting anyone down here, but what do you think you do really well compared to some other people out there?
I don't know that I do this better than anyone else or really well. I've been around for a long time. What I see in the space is when the market changes, people that were crypto experts or wholesaling experts last week are now creative finance and sub two experts. I've been a sub two teacher for over 20 years. 95% of the deals we do are sub twos. That's what we look for. That's what we focus on. And as such, I feel like I'm very qualified to teach.
Yeah,
I don't try to be an expert on everything under the sun because
yeah,
we don't do everything under the sun. We stay in our lane. As far as what I do differently, I try to really keep it simple.
yeah,
Every deal is not a good fit for a sub two. One of the craziest things I hear out there and heard a lot, I haven't heard so much about it recently, but they were preaching this for months and months. A student would come in a group and say, "Hey, I found this potential sub two. The seller's open to it, but the loan is not a good one. The interest rate's super high. The payment's too high to use it as a rental." And the immediate answer would be, oh, Airbnb it, Airbnb it. That's a very dangerous model. So many municipalities are shutting down Airbnbs. If you don't have a plan B for your property, if it has little to no equity, if it has a bad loan and a payment that won't accommodate a regular rental, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. If you get shut down, what's going to happen?
yeah,
You're going to have a problem property. Sub two is not a magic wand. It is a method of acquisition. The same common sense deals of what make a deal are still in play.
yeah,
It's got cash flow. It's got to have equity. It's got to have some of those components. So yeah, that's
yeah,
we stay away from that. everything can be a deal mentality, because it's just not true.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, you niche down and double down on that niche, and you've stood the test of time. You've been doing it for 20 years, and
Right.
that's what you're doing differently. You've stood the test of time. So that's massive. That people can, you've got that brand, you've got that name that people can trust because you've been around forever. So yeah, that's awesome. Now I've got a couple of quick little questions. Your greatest sub two lesson that you learnt in the 20 years in the space.
Yeah. I think I really just actually touched on that. That a bad deal is a bad deal. Buying a house in a bad area just because it's got a good loan. There are a lot of considerations to buying real estate. It's not just the financing. It's not just the condition of the house. And sub two is not going to fix that. If you're buying a house in a really bad neighborhood, people don't want to make that their home. They don't want to live there. You're going to have problems. So just because someone will give you a deed doesn't mean you should take it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. So do your due diligence and yeah, don't take every deal. The second
right.
one I had was greatest sub two failures. Have you had any flops or anything or close to flops?
Flops for sure, and that's a good example. I bought a house sub two once that I thought it was a great loan. It allowed for rental income, but it was in one of the worst parts of town. This was early in my investing, and I had constant problems with that property. Every time I turned a tenant in it, it was vandalized, and people broke into it and stole wiring and stole the air conditioner compressors and everything else. So that really goes back to what I just said. You want to be
Yeah,
very selective in the areas that you buy, even if it's a sub two, even if you don't need a bank, even if you don't need money to get into it. Make sure you analyze that deal properly.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what's William Tingle's sub two superpower? What would you say is what you just flex on? You just love it. You eat it up for breakfast
I
every
I am so brutally honest with sellers. I think it's shocking to them, and as a result, I'm very effective at negotiating. I think my wife, she's sitting here. I think she'll tell you, I can make a seller feel totally at ease pretty quickly. If they ask me a hard question, I don't and about it. If a seller asks me what's going to happen, William, if you don't make my payments, I'm going to say, well, Graham, if I don't make your payments, your credit's fried.
Yeah,
You have to trust me to do it and feel good about this transaction, or it's
yeah,
just not going to happen. I also make sure that my sellers know I am an investor. I'm here to make a profit. I may not be their best choice. And
yeah,
if I can refer them to an agent to sell their house, that's fine. I'm glad to do it. I am there to make a profit, but I want to help them too. So that's really important. So I think that's one reason we do very well with our sellers.
yeah. Because you come across a lot of distress, don't you? So you've
Right.
got to have that a slight bit of that in your personality, or else you don't want to be a mercenary. You've got to have that bit of bit of empathy in your personality to a
Right.
certain point. But it is business, like you said. It's still got to make sense. The last thing I was going to ask on what you do in your own business is where to from here? Like, and I just want to touch on this on people that don't know you. You do a bit of traveling. You smell the roses. You and your wife Jody are always on social media, so he's like enjoying life. So, is that a part of the future, like to be able to do that more and more, and still continue doing your business?
Oh, for sure. We just got into the Northwest Arkansas market. We're really liking it here. We're doing very well here. Uh, One of the things that I try to teach my students is you don't have to buy 500 houses a year to be successful. In fact, one of the things we teach inside Sub2 Max is that you can buy one house a month. That's all you have to buy, one house a month with very little equity, and you can create over $500,000 a year income inside of 3 years. We sell all of our houses with seller financing, or we flip them. That's the way we do it. And you just don't have to grind all the time. If we want to take 2 weeks off, when we just got back from 2 weeks in Hawaii, we just take 2 weeks off and we go and do things. So
Yeah,
that's the lifestyle that I want to live. I don't want to work 20. I've lived my life working 60 and 70 hours a
yeah,
week. I don't want to do that now.
yeah,
You just don't have to.
yeah. So you still want to smell the roses and
Right.
build in. So sub twos for life for you guys.
Uh,
You're just going to continue
Absolutely.
doing it. That's it. You know for the foreseeable future. That's you're locked in. So that's good.
for
Now I
sure.
want to go across to your education, your mentoring, coaching side of it,
Mhm.
and just ask you if you put that cap on now, take the investor cap off, and when did you first start basically training or coaching students in sub twos? When did that start?
I got started as an investor. I quit my job in a year, did a lot of seminars and those things. Educating myself. I didn't go as a speaker. I was a student, and I would always get surrounded by people because they always wanted to know, how did you do this? How did you accomplish this so quickly? What are you doing? We didn't have Facebook back then. We had those online news groups and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But anyway, so I got to where I was answering so many emails and answering so many questions from people. One of my friends said, "You should write a course." And I said, "Gosh, I don't know if I can write a course or not," but I did. And that was about 20 years ago. So I've been teaching people on Sub 2 and creative finance for about 20 years. That's how I
yeah,
got started doing it.
yeah. That's cool. That's cool. And was it a passion, like, or did it just happen? Like, did you go, I want to make a difference, I want to do, or was it like five people reached out and said, "Can you show me how to do it"? How did it sort of evolve?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, it really wasn't because I had no idea. I had no thoughts of being a teacher. When you have a ninth grade education, you don't think teaching is something you'll really be doing. But what I've learned as a coach is it's so exciting to see somebody come to you in a bad place in their life, and you give them a skill that changes their life. And you get those emails, and Jody can tell you, we get text or we get an email or a Facebook Messenger that says, "You have no idea the difference you've made in my life. I'm able to do this or do that or spend more time with my family. And this would have never happened for me if you hadn't taught me how to do these things." That's amazing, really. So we really,
Yeah,
really enjoy that.
that'd be awesome. Because that is really changing people's life, isn't it? The course of their life. So that's amazing. That would be great. And the other thing I was going to ask you, the hardest thing about being a coach or a mentor. What's the hardest thing that you find?
The hardest thing about being a coach is spending time with people, trying to show them the simplicity in what we do, and seeing them spend money, continue to take courses, go to seminars, invest money and not take action. Never mail a card, never pick up the phone and call a seller, never go look at a house. They're just paralyzed by fear and can't get past that. And the sad reality, and we as coaches know this, is that close to 97% of people who take some form of coaching or buy a course or do something like that will never ever buy a house because they're paralyzed by some type of fear. That's the hardest part. When really, like I said, pick up the phone, talk to a seller, just have a conversation. They get so stuck on the busy work. Well, what kind of script do I need? Forget the script, have a conversation, connect with someone, try to find out what their issue is and solve the problem. You don't need a script, just connect. And we're so social media oriented
Yeah,
today. We want to text everybody. We don't want to have that personal connection with people. I can go to a function with a pocket full of business cards and try to give a business card to everyone I meet. And it's amazing the number of investors who don't even carry a business card, But
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
that you meet know what you do. Put enough feelers out there, you'll buy a house. And that
yeah,
one house, that's that proof of concept. It works. I can do this, and then you can buy 100 houses.
yeah. That's. I mean, those stats are true. Like, just personally, what I mean, obviously it's psychology. How do you break through that? I mean, if you do a course on how to break through them mental blocks, you'd be a billionaire, wouldn't you? Because that's what trips people over. It's not the tools, it's the mindset, isn't it?
It really,
That
it really is. My thing with the Carlton Sheets course and why I ordered it, I looked at all those people on his infomercial and I said, "Gee, if those guys can do it, I can certainly do it too." And I was afraid to call people. I got cussed out on the phone. I got called all kind of names. But I said, you know what? It's not personal. I can't let this stop me from achieving what I want to achieve. And that's something better than I have now. The first thing you have to do is make the decision, the realization that you're worth this. A surprising number of people are afraid of success. They don't feel like they're worth it or that they deserve it. But everyone deserves to have a good life, and especially one that you work for and actually earn. So just get out there and talk to people. A lot of people that need our help, especially now. The economy's bad, foreclosures are increasing, and these people are just grateful that you're there and you're
Yeah.
able to solve their problem.
Yeah, you make a massive point, and I don't want to turn it into the Dr. Phil show, but
Right.
you almost need to do some self development before you get into the real estate space, don't you? You know, like to get yourself, and that is a big fear of people getting on the phone,
Mhm.
and you know, people do everything but get on the phone, they message and everything, but old school people like yourself that have been around for a while and use those skills have huge success. And from what I saw, you know, I've only been in the industry virtually from over here for a couple of years. The people that are good on the phone generally do a lot of deals. They get on the phone, they talk to people, and this culture of just text blasting and you know trying to close a deal over a text, you can't beat old fashioned conversation and a Zoom call or even you know belly to belly. So
Right.
that's something I think that's starting to come back into vogue now. I think people are starting to really think, you know, we got to start communicating as human beings again, or
Mhm.
else, you know,
Yeah.
you're just another number. So you've had a lot of success with that. You just get on the phone and you just have it out with the person.
Well, that's one thing I'm really enjoying about being local again. Sure, you can Zoom and you can get on the phone with people when you're remote, but when you're in the town they're in or 5 miles away from them, you can drive out, meet with them, sit at their kitchen table. That's where you really make
Yeah,
a deal, and it's
yeah,
so much easier to do it that way.
yeah. That'd be awesome. I can't wait to come out the states and actually do that. I'm looking to drive for dollars, door knocked, all the things that people. I'm going to be running around with banded signs like people go, oh no.
Right.
I mean, we just can't do that over here. So
Mhm.
it excites me,
Mhm.
and I think that's right. Now I'm going to ask you the two. It's a double sort of double edged sword. This one. What's it, with your coaching? What's your uniqueness and what's your superpower? So what separates you? You think with you know from what other people are doing, and what's your superpower? What do you love doing when you're coaching?
The uniqueness of our coaching, well, number one, we actually have a $7 coaching program, $7 a month, where I'll personally answer every student's questions every single week, in addition to just the post and things that we do in there. Also, one thing that's unique about us is you never talk to an assistant coach or anything else. You're talking to Jody and I.
Yeah,
We're in there all the time. We don't pawn you off to somebody else. Another thing is that I'm not going to tell you, a bunch of pie in the sky stuff. This works or that works, or yeah, we can polish anything up and make it a deal. If it's bad, I'm going to tell you it's just not going to work. As far as the superpower, I guess my students would answer that better than me. But I feel like if I have a superpower, it's my ability to explain things in a very simple, easy to understand way. And part of that
yeah,
may come from the fact that I don't have 10 college degrees, but it has to be simple. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I figured real estate out okay, but some people
yeah,
are better at some things than others. But it just can really keep it simple.
yeah. Absolutely, great advice. Great advice. And um, the next question I was going to go into, I mean, that's probably enough with the education, was because I picked it up. I've got it on the screen. Was the $7 program? I mean, that's amazing. So that's $7 a month. And are you in a Facebook group or you just get access? How do you get access to you
You
for
get
$7 a
you get
month?
access to some video training inside a school that we have, and you also get
Yeah,
access to our Facebook group where I answer the questions. Yeah, any questions you have, I do a Facebook Live every week with those students in there privately, and then of course we also do the Go Talk. That we do
yeah,
every week, which is our Facebook Live that we put out everywhere. But you have access to me for $7 a month, and try getting that with virtually anybody else in the world. You're not going to speak to them for $7 a month in any way. But I personally answer every question in that group every
yeah.
week.
So you're giving people there's no excuse. I haven't got any money. $7. People spend more than that on their coffee
That's
of a day. So
that's
that's a
literally
day.
that's literally
So that's great.
bucks. Yeah.
So we'll when we do our wrap up in a minute, I'm going to point out those websites. But that's a doozy. $7 to get started and to get in the system and to have access to you. That's amazing. So well done on that. I mean, you're giving people at ground level an opportunity to come in. So that's awesome. Um, and we'll do a shout out now. We're sort of almost at time, and it's flown. This has been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, a few people in the chat are pretty excited, and we'll probably reach out to you on these touch points. But just I'll get you to go through it. Your initial website, which is a sub 2 deals, so that's probably the best way to reach out to you. Is it just click on the website and reach out to you that way? You've got social media as well, haven't you? So that people can follow you on social media
Right.
and send you a message.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the $7 coaching one on the screen as well in the smaller text. And then we've got the podcast. Now, you're a well-known podcaster, and anyone that hasn't seen it, go and watch it, because you really rip things apart. You get guests in, and you really dig down deep. It's not just fluff and everything. You really sort of give a lot of content. So they're the 3 touch points, probably the best ones to get you, aren't they, William?
Mm-hmm. It is, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Sub2 TV, SUB, the number 2 TV.com. We release videos almost every single day. Anything from the shorts to the full videos explaining concepts and answering questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So between those 3 and the YouTube, you've got it covered. So, all right. Well, firstly, I'm just going to say it's been a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate your time. And if anyone that hasn't seen this and sees a replay, just go through it. There's so much to unpack in there in such a short amount of time. So thank you, William. Thanks, Jody's in the background. So thank you, Jody, for giving us William for half an hour, 40 minutes. a pleasure. Now, on a personal note, the only problem for me is podcasting is really tough, because I see a $7 deal, I just keep spending money. I'm just like, oh mate, that's too good to be true. So that's the only thing. But I think I'm going to join that. I think you've got your first sale off the Thunder from Down Under podcast.
Yeah.
So
well, come on,
it'll be a pleasure to connect with you too, William. Yeah. It'll be great. So thanks for coming on. They're the touch point guys. And if you just want to say goodbye to the audience, and we'll cut it off there, sure. William.
Well, thanks, Graham, for having me, and everybody for joining us and giving up your time today to be with us. If you want to contact us in any way, you know how to do it. We answer questions all the time, and we'll help you any way we can to get started.
All right. Well, thanks to William the Goat Tingle. You have been thunderstruck, guys. Cheers and goodbye. Have a great day, everyone.